Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales Tenshu Monogatari, loosely known in English as Goddess of the Dark Tower, which initially aired in Japan on Fuji TV's Noitamina block from February 9 to March 2, 2006, and aired in the USA on Imagination TV from July 31 to August 21, 2007. This was based on Kyoka Izumi's 1951 play of the same name. It was directed by Hidehiko Kadota and Gozo Nagayama. The screenwriter was Yuji Sakamoto. The character designs were done by Yasuhiro Nakura. The English dub was done by the Ocean Production in Vancouver, Canada. It was originally licensed by Genyon, but it's now out of print. And it starred the voices of, on the Japanese side, Hikaru Mitorikawa, Hoko Kuwashima, Saeko Chiba, Masaya Onosaka, Kappe Yamaguchi, Ako Mayama, and Gozo Shioya. And on the English side, we have Kirby Morrow, Willow Johnson, Tracy Power, Samuel Vincent, Alec Willows, Kathy Weselick, and Lee Takar. I have not really watched this particular tale as compared to my experiences with the former tale, Yotsuya Kaidan, but from what I heard from people who watched Tenshu Monogatari, they seem to state that this was kind of the weaker story compared to Yotsuya Kaidan and Bakemonogatari. So, how well does this story hold up in my opinion? Well, let's find out right now. Starting off with the story, this basically chronicles the tale of a young falconer by the name of Zushonosuke, who has a duty by the Lord Harima to capture a falcon in which it wandered off to some unknown territories. Meanwhile, we have a set of mysterious creatures known as the Forbidden Gods who feed on human flesh to keep themselves alive. Enter Tomohime, who is also a forbidden goddess, and she then catches the eye of Zushonosuke and thus begins their forbidden romance. Now, out of all the three stories of Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales, this one is the least horror-based, as it's mostly a supernatural thriller romance story between a goddess and a human in the forms of Tomihime and Zushonosuke. But what it managed to deliver is a pretty solid love story between a goddess and a human, and a forbidden one at that. It's almost reminiscent of its very popular counterpart, Romeo and Juliet, although Tomihime and Zushonosuke are a lot older and seemingly more mature. Added into the mix is the third wheel, Zushonosuke's betrothed, Oshizu, who bears a lot of feelings for him and cannot stand to see Zushonosuke with another woman. So what we have here are some fair amounts of soap opera elements with a little bit of a love triangle, forbidden love, and even the tensions between the supernatural and the normal, which all come into play. Sure, the story does build itself up pretty well, especially with the growing relationship between Zushonosuke and Tomihime, but somewhere towards the ending, some of the fates of certain characters remain completely ambiguous. And I dare not spoil the ending, but even though it is kind of bittersweet, sometimes I felt like the fates for certain characters were completely ambiguous, and there were certain things that didn't really feel like it was wrapped up. I'm sure that the story could have benefited with a much longer run, and I'm sure that with that said longer run, the characters would have been more developed, a lot of things would have happened, and probably would have brought in a lot more meat to the story, and a lot of things would have been a lot more fleshed out. So overall, while the story was pretty solid, especially the love story between Zushonosuke and Tomihime, there were some plot holes that kinda left a lot of open questions, and there were some ambiguities that had to be cleared up, but otherwise it was a pretty solid package from beginning to end. The animation is kind of cartoonish on some of the characters, but it's nonetheless really well detailed, especially the designs for the goddesses. Their designs are really, really great, as in they're elaborate, they have this type of haunting beauty about them, and every time they metamorphosize into their demonic forms, I cannot help but feel totally immersed with fright every time they transform. And the backgrounds are actually pretty solid, and the color palette used is really good. So I'm not going to mince words here. The overall design when it comes to both the character design, the background design, and the overall animation was pretty solid, even though there were times that it did feel a little bit cartoony compared to its predecessor, Yotsuya Gaiden. The music is still the same. We still have Heat Island rapped by Rhymester, and of course, the ever somber Memento of Spring sung gorgeously by Chitose Hajime, and the incidental music also served its purpose very well. The characters are pretty well developed and pretty interesting, especially our two main leads. Starting off with Zushonosuke, he is a young man who is so full of honor and so full of integrity that he will not hurt anyone or anything as long as he manages to keep an upright head and his values in complete check. He is someone who is a pure-hearted soul, someone who is loyal to his master, someone who upholds his moral codes, and someone who is, just simply put, an all-around good guy. Sure, his characterization is quite simplistic, but he is nonetheless quite fascinating to watch, especially when he has his first moments with the mysterious Tomihime, in which he develops a romantic interest with. And his relationship with Tomihime seems to blossom and blossom as he is the one who tries to see a fair amount of humanity within her. He is, without a doubt, the all-around good guy in this story, and even though he is a bit on the simplistic side, he is still a very good character to witness. Tomihime is a fascinating enigma. She is a forgotten goddess who has to feed on human flesh in order for her and her kin to stay alive. She is someone who is dignified, very beautiful, very mysterious, and quite fascinating. And as the story goes on, she reveals a fair amount of emotion behind all of that iciness and behind her withdrawn nature, because throughout the story, she's presented as mostly withdrawn and doesn't really express a huge gamut of emotions. That is until she meets Zushonosuke does he bring out a fair amount of humanity within her. She starts to express herself a lot more when she's around him, but when she is in her princess form, she is stern and she takes no crap from anyone. And it's safe to say that both Zushonosuke and Tomihime are actually really great as a couple. And they've pretty much solidified themselves as one of my most favorite anime couples of all time. Sure, the pairing between a human and a supernatural being has been done many times in the anime world. We have such installments like Inuyasha and Zenki who have done this type of trope before, but in terms of Zushonosuke and Tomihime as a couple, their relationship with each other is really genuine and you don't see them bicker too much, and you can tell that they truly respect and love each other. And as the story progresses, their relationship with each other, even though it does go through some really tough tribulations, manage to stay as strong as ever. And even when the third wheel, Oshizu, tries to break them up, they still manage to stay pretty strong as a couple up until the very end. And speaking of Oshizu, she is yet another interesting character. Now, on the outside, she does seem like the third wheel because she is originally Zushonosuke's betrothed. She's the one who wants to marry him, and She is also the one who has made herself his fiancée. In a few days or so, they might end up getting married. And she still has very strong feelings for him. And even though she does have her fair share of being kind of clingy and kind of jealous, she still has a fair share of humanity within her. She is a very kind and caring person. She is considerate, and she is someone who seems like the total girl next door. She is very much someone who is very good-natured. She cannot even bear it when Zushonosuke is with another woman, and she will make sure that their relationship will not be damaged. Overall, Oshizu is loyal, she's kind-hearted, and she's someone who wants to make sure that her relationship with Zushonosuke functions. Then we have Kaikaimaru and Kikimaru, the comedic relief of this particular installment. Now, on the outside, you might think that they are rather disposable characters, but when you get to know them a lot more, they can hold up their own pretty well, especially in a fight. These two demons are really entertaining, not only because of the fact that they are hilarious, but because they manage to lighten the story, because Tenshu Monogatari is essentially a romantic drama, and we throw in a couple of comedic characters, they kind of bring in a little bit of lightness to the story. Even though their characters are pretty much interchangeable, I still have to say that Kaikaimaru and Kikimaru are really enjoyable, and they manage to have a lot of fun moments when these two are on screen, especially with their verbal tics, with Kikimaru constantly going ki ki ki, and with Kaikaimaru doing a little bit of a variant like kai kai kai. These two definitely steal the show in their own special ways, not just because of the fact that they are a comedic duo, being the ancient Japanese version of Laurel and Hardy, but they managed to hold up on their own pretty well, all thanks to their charisma and all thanks to their unique sense of charm. And I know I'm going to sound a little bit like a fanboy here, but they're kind of adorable in terms of how they act. Sure, they come off as really cheeky and mischievous, but there's a certain element which makes them rather infectious, thus making them really enjoyable as characters. Lord Harima is on the outside a dignified character who seems to have a pretty funny strike, but once the story progresses, one gets to see just how ruthless and just how nasty this guy really is. Sure, you won't think that he might not end up abusing his power, but in the later parts of the story, he truly does. Especially when a young servant girl accidentally makes his little toe bleed. At first, you might think that Lord Harima might forgive the servant girl, but no. He takes out a katana and slashes her in the back, thus proving himself to be a ruthless dictator, and especially when he is doing some private business in the caravan with another servant girl. He does prove himself to be a very Machiavellian character, and don't let his character design fool you. He's no funny man. He is a ruthless, heartless, and just a pretty nasty character. Then we also have his advisors slash warriors, Shuri Odawara and Kuhei Yamazumi. These two basically serve as the Lord's advisors in the first half of the story, but much later in the story, they start to become a lot more involved in trying to battle against the mysterious mountain. There's not much to say about them, but they managed to hold up on the story pretty well. Shitanaga Uba serves as Tomihime's right-hand woman slash royal counselor. Now, on the outside, you might think that she's another crabby old woman, but on the inside, when she transforms into her demonic form, one has to run for his dear life when she transforms. She's a pretty bitter, ruthless, and kind of a mean character, but underneath that crabbiness and underneath all of that bitterness that she has towards humans lies a pretty concerned figure who just wants to make sure that Tomihime does not make the same mistake as her mother Haguri did. And speaking of Haguri, the falcon Haguri, originally known as Kojiro, is also a very fascinating enigma. She starts out as Kojiro, the Lord's falcon who mysteriously flew away, but as she ended up in the hands of Tomihime, she's then known through her real name Haguri. And she is a pretty enigmatic figure, and I dare not spoil her backstory as you'll have to watch it for yourself. But it's safe to say that it is rather fascinating, and it kind of fleshes out who Tomihime is as a character through this particular person. Then we have Tomihime's handmaidens, Suzuki, who does a fair amount of talking and seems to be pretty close to Tomihime, Omenaishi, Kikyo, Hagi, Kuzu, and Nadeshiko. They don't just serve Tomihime as their handmaidens, but also her guards, especially when enemies come to attack. They attack back with their own sets of weapons. Think of them as the Japanese version of Wagner's Parsifal's Flower Maidens, with their abilities to lure in strangers to their castle only to have them completely destroyed. And of course, they also have their fair share of charms and wiles, which they also use as their weapons. So overall, the characters were quite fascinating, but I have to give it to both Sushonosuke and Tomihime for really leading the show very well with their superb chemistry and, of course, how they managed to carry the entire show so well. The voice acting in both tracks was excellent, especially when you have Hikaru Midorikawa and Hokoku Washima as the couple on the Japanese side, and Kirby Morrow and Willow Johnson as the couple on the English side. So let's start off with Hikaru Midorikawa as Sushonosuke. It should be no surprise that Midorikawa-san has specialized in a fair amount of heroic roles, especially the likes of Tamahome from Fushigi Yugi. Yes, this gentleman is also quite well known for also voicing a fair amount of anti-heroes and villains, most notably Schuldig from Weißkreuz, and even that of Anubis from Detective School Q, but hearing him as Sushonosuke was quite a fascinating treat. He managed to give him a great amount of dignity, honor, integrity, pride, and at the same time he made him an all-around good guy, someone who was able to look out for the little ones, and someone who was able to be steadfast and brave and tall, and he certainly did that with a lot of grace. He gave Sushonosuke a lot of life that he made him very fascinating as a character. He was very nuanced as a voice actor. He was able to find a lot of really fine moments with this particular character, and it's all thanks to that smooth, even, and youthful sounding voice, which managed to make him very ideal for casting him in all of these fine, elegant gentlemen. And I could definitely consider him to be one of the very few seiyuu to be branded as the man with 1,000 voices. Yes, he does have his fair share of competitors like Takehito Koyasu, in which he's been collaborating with in many projects, and even Wataru Takagi, and even the great Koichi Yamadera and Toshihiko Seki. But Hikaru Midorikawa proved himself to be an overall industry veteran, given the lengthy amount of experience he had behind the mic, and how he managed to make characters like Sushonosuke come to life, all thanks to his overall dedication and charisma as a voice actor. I also have to give high marks to Kirby Morrow's superb performance of Sushonosuke. He also does give Sushonosuke a great amount of dignity, integrity, and bravery, and he does it so well. with a great amount of grace and charm, he certainly made this character come to life. And he was also very well known for voicing Miroku from Inuyasha. And unlike Miroku, he does not make Zushinosuke a complete pervert. Instead, he makes him calm, reasonable, passionate, and really a great character. So I have to give it to both Midorikawa-san and Mr. Morrow for both making Zushinosuke a calm, dignified gentleman and an all-around good guy who is radiating with so much positivity that his character has become quite infectious. It should come off as no surprise that Hoko Kuwashima is one of my most favorite female seiyuu of all time. I first heard her as Sereia from the Strega, and even Songmina from both Soul Calibur and Soul Calibur 2. And from then on there, I have been following her career as a seiyuu, and hearing her as Tomihime was an absolute treat. The way she managed to make Tomihime a withdrawn enigma with a lot of grace, beauty, and nobility was fascinating. She was able to pull off this role perfectly. It fit her like a glove. And it should be no surprise that Kuwashima-san has an extremely wide vocal range. This is a woman who can go from voicing young boys to young girls to kick-ass young women to villainesses and even to mysterious anti-heroines much like Tomihime. She certainly proves herself to be one of the very few female seiyuu to have the mark of woman of 1,000 voices, and she managed to really pull off Tomihime's nuances so well, especially in her few moments where she is emotionally charged. You can definitely feel every moment she is so happy to see her beloved falcon Haguri, and you can feel the moments where she is quite confused of how she should feel for Zushinosuke. Kuwashima-san does a magnificent job bringing out a lot of humanity with Tomihime. She managed to unveil each and every layer of Tomihime, and she did so in a way that made her outstanding as a voice actress. Willow Johnson is a little bit more mature sounding in this role, but I still have to give her loads of kudos for her really fine vocal work. She was able to make Tomihime equally withdrawn and equally graceful, beautiful, and enigmatic, and she did so in her trademark mezzo-soprano voice. While Hoko Kuwashima's timbre is leaning towards more on the soprano side, Willow Johnson's mezzo-soprano voice is a pretty welcome addition to Tomihime, as Miss Johnson has also been extremely well known for voicing all of these withdrawn female characters who managed to kick a fair amount of ass, like Kikyo from Inuyasha, and she did the role of Tomihime a great amount of justice with her fine vocal performance, even though she sounded a little bit too mature for my tastes. But regardless, both Kuwashima-san and Miss Johnson managed to give their breathy and eloquent voices a lot of life to Tomihime. And I really have to give it to both Hikaru Midorikawa and Hoku Kuwashima for proving themselves to be extremely versatile as voice actors with their extremely wide ranges and their overall great capabilities as fine vocal thespians, and of course Kirby Morrow's and Willow Johnson's overall commitment to their craft into making the tragic pair of Zushinosuke and Tomihime come to life. Saeko Chiba really gives a fine portrayal of Oshizu. She does a pretty fine job with making Oshizu a sweet, mild-mannered, loving young woman, and even though she is mainly well known for voicing a fair amount of tsunderes, she can also do a great job with voicing soft-spoken characters. one should take a listen to her interpretation of Asmaria from Chrono Crusade. Here, I thought that her portrayal of Oshizu was very well done. She was able to make her sweet and gentle, and it's all thanks to that lilting and soft soprano voice. Tracy Power was solid as Oshizu. Her acting was really good, but she kind of doesn't measure up to Sayako Chiba. But I still have to give a lot of credit to Tracy Power for bringing in a lot of grace and beauty to Oshizu. She certainly did a really good job making Oshizu come to life, and she managed to find a lot of nuances with this particular character. In terms of Kikimaru and Kaikaimaru, we have on the Japanese track Masaya Onosaka and Kappe Yamaguchi. And both of these gentlemen managed to do amazing jobs as these two comedic characters. We have both Masaya Onosaka and Kappe Yamaguchi putting their great tenor voices to work, and they managed to bring in their brand of comedy to the table without overplaying it. They managed to make their characters a lot of fun, complete with their vocal tics, and they managed to steal the show pretty well. The same thing I can say about Samuel Vincent and Alec Willows. They also did a very great job with making Kikimaru and Kaikaimaru very fun and lovable as characters. They kept the verbal tics, and they certainly made their performances stand out so well. They were enthusiastic, they were charismatic, and they were, just simply put, fine voice actors all around. Both Akomayama and Kathy Wesselook managed to make Uba a very scary, enigmatic, and simply put, skin-crawlingly awesome character. They managed to put their guttural voices to work into making this crabby yet well-meaning old lady come to life, and they certainly did a very fine job bringing in the creepy, darker aspects of this particular character to life, and they were pretty seasoned voice actresses to make Uba come to life in their own special ways. Both Gozo Shioya and Lee Takar managed to bring in a lot of megalomania and a lot of madness to Lord Harima. They managed to make their sniveling and serpentine voices come to life with this particular character, making him quite the sleazeball, and they did so in a way that made these two glorious as vocal thespians. And they certainly proved themselves to be pretty versatile in their work, whether it be voicing comedic characters or dramatic characters. I thought that their portrayal of Lord Harima was their finest work. Both Eiji Takamoto and Naoki Imamura and John Novak and Michael Dobson bring in a lot of charisma and charm to both Shuri Odawara and Kuhei Yamazumi. Their vocal work was really well done as they brought these two men to life, and they did so in a way that made them quite the seasoned voice actors, and they managed to put in a fair amount of nuance into their work. Special kudos also has to go to the very fine voice actresses who voiced the handmaidens. On the Japanese side, we have Akemi Kanda, Yui Kano, Kozue Kamada, Natsuki Sakamoto, Mari Yoshikura, and Orie Kimoto. And on the English side, we have Kelly Sheridan, Anna Kummer, Lalania Lindbjerg, Kathy Wesselook, Brenna O'Brien, and Monica Story. These superb voice actresses, whether it be on the Japanese side and on the English side, did an amazing job bringing the handmaidens to life. They gave each of them their own sets of personalities and their own sets of charms, and they certainly seemed to have a fair amount of fun with these roles. So overall, the voice acting was really phenomenal, especially when you have on the Japanese side Hikaru Midorikawa and Hokoku Washima, and on the English side, Kirby Morrow and Willow Johnson leading the helm in such a way that they made their characters so believably awesome, and especially when it comes to their chemistry and their overall great work that they had to offer as vocal thespians. So overall, yes, I do feel like this was the weaker entry compared to all three stories of the Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales anthology, but I still have to say that it is a pretty strong romance story. Yes, it is the least horror based when it comes to all of those elements, but the horror elements in this particular tale are still there. They still managed to build up the atmosphere pretty well, and despite all that, I still have to give it a lot of credit for bringing such wonderfully lovable characters like Zushonosuke and Tomihime to life. With that said, I give Tenshu Monogatari a well-deserved rating of 4 out of 5 stars. Yes, I'm sure that some of you are pretty surprised that I gave it a really high rating because despite it not really being a super creepy story, I still have to give loads of credit for how Zushonosuke and Tomihime brought the story to life in their own special ways. Their chemistry and their pure love for each other certainly made this particular story stand out in its own special way. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in much later for my review of the final entry to Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales, and that is Bakeneko. So until then, good night everybody and happy Halloween.